Well, it's almost always never easy, but the Cardinals and Ryan Helsley got through the ninth inning on Saturday and have now won 7 in a row. We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is the evening hours of Saturday, May 10th, 2025. And the Cardinals just keep finding a way. It was a lot more interesting, a lot more dramatic in the bottom of the ninth inning on Saturday afternoon in Washington, D.C. than it needed to be. But all's well that ends well for Ryan Helsley and the Cardinals as they win it 4-2 over the Nationals. They clinch the series this weekend in D.C., and they'll go for the sweep on Sunday with Miles Mikolas taking on Mackenzie Gore. But we'll talk about Saturday's win as it felt like for the early portion of this game, another breeze for the Cardinals, a cakewalk. Not quite to the extent of the 10-0 win on Friday, but the Cardinals racked up 4 runs in the second inning against Trevor Williams. They unfortunately weren't able to tack on, which is part of what made this game more interesting in the latter stages. But I'll be honest with you, the majority of this game, it just felt like the Nationals were not going to mount much of a charge. Like, this doesn't really seem like a ball club that's very good. I know we just came off of watching the Cardinals beat up on the Pirates for 3 games in a row, and they're really a rough club. Still not even close to being the worst team in the National League, though. That distinction goes to the Rockies. Holy crap, if the Cardinals don't sweep the Rockies later in the season when they face off against Colorado, then you might have some issues. I believe they lost 21-0 to the Padres today. Anyway, the Nationals aren't a very good team either, and it kind of just felt that way for much of this game on Saturday as Andre Pallante was cruising. And I certainly don't want to take away from Andre Pallante, who had a really good start. Kind of a get-right game for him after Eric Fedde had his get-right game on Friday night. But this is a lineup, as we talked about when it pertained to Fedde's outing, that there are some holes in this lineup. And as long as you pay mind to the couple few batters that can beat you, you should be able to navigate it with relative ease. And Palante made it simple, kept it simple. 7 strikeouts in 7 1/3 innings. He gives up 2 runs, both earned, and it comes on the final pitch he throws. Really maybe the only mistake he made all day. A mistake pitch to Dylan Cruz, who is a former top pick of the Washington Nationals, has really struggled this season, but we did mention coming in, keep an eye on him. Well, he was down in the 9-hole for the Nationals today and ends up getting Palante there for the 2-run homer, which was just after a 8th inning play to begin the frame where Nolan Gorman lets the ball just nick off the side of his glove. Would have been a really nice way to get Palante's 8th inning started if they could have secured that out. Had another ground out thereafter, though, and that one was taken care of. But it was the final out that Palante would record as Cruz beats him, which takes away from the scoreless outing. And I get it a day after Eric Fedde threw his complete game shutty that there was a temptation of, okay, get Palante through a quick 8th inning and maybe he could have one himself and you go back to back. I will say, when I was watching the commercial break, waiting for the top of the 8th inning, the bottom of the 8th inning with the Nationals at home, I was thinking I would go to the bullpen. I would not have Palante start the bottom of the 8th inning. They had him start, and really the 2 ground balls that he induced would have been perfectly fine if Gorman had fielded the first one. You'd have 2 outs and nobody on base for that Cruz at bat. And if he homers off of you, it's a solo shot, not that big of a deal. And then maybe Ollie Marmol could take him out or could allow him to try to finish the inning. Would have needed to be really efficient to get through the complete game shutout. With that in mind, I thought, all right, it's a 4-run game, not a 10-run game, so that's a difference from Fedde the night before. And if Palante has an efficient, let's say, 13-pitch inning, I think he would have been right around 100 pitches at the end of the game, at the end of the 8th inning if that had been the case. Because I think he was at 87. 87 is the number through 7, if I'm not mistaken. So he was quickly getting balls in play against him because he saw 3 batters in that 8th inning and only ended up on 91 pitches for the day. But it was a ground ball, squeaks through for a hit, ground out, and then the home run by Cruz. It happened awfully quickly against Palante. I just thought it would have been so valuable to get him an overwhelmingly positive outing, 7 scoreless after kind of struggling to get deeper into starts the last few times through. Might have been meaningful. And I thought, they got a little bit greedy with that one for me. But I also understand it. Like I said, had Gorman fielded the first ball, you'd be in a completely different scenario. So this isn't second-guessing so much as I was in the moment, I was thinking, man, I understand the impetus, but I would love to see Palante just have that solid 7 innings of nothingness, of scoreless baseball, 7 strikeouts. You would have felt really good about that. He still can feel very good about a couple of things. One, the fact that he won the game, improves to 3-2. He can also feel good about just his outing in general. 7 1/3, 2 runs allowed is still a great outing. But his ERA had actually dropped below 4 on the season before that Dylan Cruz home run. I think it was at like 3.98 beginning the 8th inning. So, I don't know. I just thought in a similar vein to Fetty, they probably could have cut it off at that point, and I would have understood it. Granted, I don't think there was anything obvious in Palante's game that suggested he was tiring or wearing down. Believe he had retired 7 in a row heading into the 8th inning. So it's not like he was suddenly wavering out there. 2 easy ground balls. One of them just was a little bit outstretched for Gorman and not able to get it. I thought it was probably a play he should have made, but it was not an error by any means. And then it was just one pitch to Cruz that caught too much of the inside part of the plate, and he turned on it and did what he's capable of doing as a former top draft pick. Those things happen. I just thought you could be so positive about it with Palante. You could say, hey, look, the ERA is below 4. You're right back where we knew you could be. That's still the case. None of that is taken away from him, despite what ended up happening with the 2-run homer. But now it's a 4-2 game, and now there's a lot more pressure, it feels like, in being able to close this thing out. They go to JoJo Romero. It was a little bit adventurous for him as well. Gives up a walk and a hit, capping out the 8th inning there, and was able to get out of the jam. But it was a little bit dicey, and you're starting to think, man, if it was 4-0 and you give Romero the clean inning, or if it's 4-0 and you give Kyle Leahy the clean inning, does this become a breezier win for the Cardinals than it ended up being? And by the way, I'll address it briefly. I guess I could say some fun. I really didn't have a lot of fun with it. But I pointed out that the Cardinals, prior to the 7th inning, hadn't allowed a run since Tuesday. And I said, we're going into the 7th inning on Saturday. Cardinals haven't allowed a run since Tuesday. That's pretty impressive. And, of course, everybody started coming at me with, it's a jinx, it's a jinx. And I tried to point out that I'm 1,000 miles away in Wentzville, Missouri at the time. And so, no, nothing I do is going to have anything to do with whatever the Cardinals might do in Washington, D.C. Well, of course, then Palante gives up the home run, and everybody says, there are some people who are saying, you jinxed it, and they're kind of like tongue-in-cheek, but you can't really tell on Twitter. And there's some people who you can tell legitimately are like, I'm blaming you. You're the reason. If the Cardinals lose this game. I'm thinking, all right, I just hope they win it because I'm tired of these people. But if they hadn't, I would have come on here with the exact same response. Of course, my tweet had nothing to do with it. Let's be adults. Anyway, that was, like I said, it wasn't actually that fun, but I cannot help myself but to go back and forth with people and point out the obvious that, no, there is no such thing as a jinx. So if you're one of those people and you're just having fun with me, we're cool. If you're one of those people and you actually believe that my tweet can cause harm to the St. Louis Cardinals, believe me, if I had those powers, I would have used them in far more evil circumstances than that. Like, I don't know, the Kansas football would never win a game, and Oklahoma probably wouldn't do very many either. Well, then again, they don't win very many games as it is. All right, cheap shot. Back to the point. The Cardinals had a much more tight, high-wire act type of game down the stretch than I thought it needed to be. But like I said, in Ollie Marmol's defense, I don't think there was really anything obvious in Palante's game prior to the 8th inning that suggested he was about to leave one hanging in front of Dylan Cruz. I don't know that was, something that was evidently on the way because he had been cruising to that point. No pun intended. The one aspect of it that I would say, though, is your bullpen is as fresh as it's ever been all season long. Fresher than it was on opening day. I mean, you think about the pitching performances the Cardinals have gotten this week. Liberatore on Tuesday goes 7. Sonny goes 7 on Wednesday. Day off Thursday. Fetty throws the whole game on Friday. You could have had your pick of the litter as far as how you wanted to attack that game. And I think maybe, and again, I'm not there in Washington, D.C., so not 100% sure exactly everything that Ollie Marmol said about that after the fact. But I guess it would be something to do with, like, look, Fetty just had the complete game. Continue. He looks good. Palante looks good. You try to push it a little bit. That's one where I would have thought, as I believed would be the case coming into the series, be aggressive to go win every single game you can win. And in that spot, I think 7 scoreless would have been perfectly suitable for Palante as the ego boost or as the confidence boost, whatever the case may be, to where I felt like that would have been plenty. But as it were, they put him out there, gives up the homer. It is what it is. Still a marvelous day for Palante, 7 1/3, 2 runs. And continuing the trend of starting pitching for the Cardinals, as I mentioned, you've got 4 outings in a row now with the starters going at least 7 innings and giving up 2 or fewer runs. On the whole, those starters gave up 3 total runs in 30 innings. That is fantastic. That is a sub-1 ERA, and we'll see if Miles Mikolas can complete the turn through the rotation with something similar on Sunday. It may take something similar. Mackenzie Gore, one of the more capable power arms of the Washington Nationals roster, and he's got good numbers this season. 3.33 the ERA. He's got big strikeout numbers is what you got to watch out with him. He's got 68 strikeouts in 46 innings. And in his recent, he's got a couple of 13s that he's put on the board. Granted, one came against the Rockies, so it hardly counts, but had 9 strikeouts in 5 innings against the Reds the last time he pitched on May the 4th. So definitely eager to see what it looks like for the Cardinals against Mackenzie Gore on Sunday. But that was my thought, is that you had the bullpen rested to be able to potentially end on a high note with Palante. And I think they got greedy to say, hey, the highest of notes would be a complete game shutout, and how about throwing 2 in a row? So that's my minor quibble, but like I said, I don't think there was anything obvious where, and I'll always be fair. If I'm going to be, I don't even know if I'd call this critical, but if I'm going to reflect on a decision and say, yeah, I was thinking in the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if they would pull him. And if it's I'd have to go back and look. If it was a lefty spot, Romero. If it's a righty spot, Leahy. And then Helsley would have the 9th. And maybe Helsley wouldn't even have to have the 9th, right? You could go 2 innings if it's a 4-0 game still with whoever comes in. Or you could bring in JoJo for the 9th. Or, whatever you need to do. I wouldn't have had any problem with Helsley pitching a 4-0 game, even though it's technically not a save situation. But I thought they could have potentially been a little bit more aggressive there. Doesn't happen. Let's move on to what does happen, which is a 4-2 contest. Romero gets out of the rest of the 8th, and then it's Helsley for the 9th inning. I want to spend a little bit of time, since there's just kind of a sleepy game otherwise. The Cardinals did some good things in the 2nd inning to be able to spark the rally and score 4 runs off of Trevor Williams, but he settled down and was able to get through a season-long 6 innings thereafter, kind of like the Palante start we saw a few weeks ago against the Mets, when he went 6 innings, I believe it was, and gave up 4 runs, all of which came in the 2nd inning. Trevor Williams settled things down. So there's not a ton to get into in terms of the offensive production for the Cardinals. We'll describe the 2nd inning for you. But I want to start with the Helsley stuff in the 9th, because this is going to continue to be a storyline. I think he's clearly not 100% where he wants to be with his pitches and with his confidence and the sequencing right now. And this was a day where I feel like it was close to going that way. It was close to going the exact path that you would want to carve out for your closer. And somewhere along the lines, it went off the rails for me. He gets Ruiz to ground out and Luis Garcia Jr. to strike out. Jose Tena has the 102-mile-per-hour fastball that he barely fights off, and it ends up being just a perfect piece of hitting. Defensive swing, but he's late on it and rolls it down the third base line, basically past the third baseman into left field for a hit. So suddenly, whereas the inning started masterfully, the slider was looking nasty to Luis Garcia during that strikeout. Puts it in on the hands of a lefty down below the zone, just really getting the bite you wanted on that pitch, but also locating it in a way that elicited the swing over the top of it. It was a really sharp slider during that plate appearance. But after the Tena single, things got a little bit wonky. Suddenly, Davey Martinez can go to his bench. He brings on Josh Bell, guy that can tie the game with one swing. And the sequence to Josh Bell for me, I just think it was a mistake not to go a little bit more confidently to the fastball. We'll go through the sequence here. 101.8 mile per hour fastball in the dirt for ball one, but he goes right back to it in the second pitch, and it was brilliant. Josh Bell couldn't have looked more off balance, couldn't have looked more like he wanted to be anywhere else on planet Earth other than in that batter's box. Just completely helpless against 101 on the outer half. And then Helsley throws a pitch that if Josh Bell were ballsy enough to be sitting on a curveball, he could have hit this thing 500 feet. But that's what you're betting on if you're Helsley. How often does he throw a curve? And in that spot, I thought that was brilliant. It was gutsy by Ryan Helsley and Pedro Pages, but it was brilliant. Curveball, hanging curveball, but it was a get-me-over curveball in a spot where Josh Bell is on skates because he had just swung through late on that 101-mile-per-hour fastball. He had no chance. So at that point, you got him dead to rights. It's 1-2. You can do a little bit of anything, but you want to throw a competitive pitch. If it's going to be the slider, it's got to be a slider. You know, you're not going to hang it, but by the same token, for it to be effective, it's got to show like it could be a strike. And it was not close. You go, okay, nothing ventured, nothing gained, though. Don't stick with it too long, because you're going to lose the impact of what you had just accomplished with strike 1 and 2 on the fastball curveball. Like, you're not going back to the curveball. That pitch served its purpose in this sequence. But you got to think at some point, the fastball is what he's afraid of. He's going to try to cheat to it. And so I get it. If you want to keep pounding him with sliders, they've got to be presentable. And none of them were. 4, 5, 6, all sliders, all in the dirt, all very easy for Josh Bell to spit on. And I think that sequence also shook Helsley a little bit in the fastball confidence. It's been a tenuous topic going back to last year, whether or not Helsley has a good feel for the fastball. And when he doesn't, he tends to go heavy into the slider. We've seen times this year where that has happened and doesn't really have a feel for the slider, and then you're just out there on an island. I'm trying to recall the game. I believe it was in Boston, the game 1 of the doubleheader on that Sunday that the Cardinals were swept in. And it seemed that day he didn't really have his fastball, but he didn't have his slider either. This was different. He had it against Luis Garcia. It was he couldn't have been sharper with that pitch. And then the fastball, all right, you throw one in the dirt to Bell, but had a beautiful fastball that got Bell swinging, and then the curveball was brilliant. You go for one slider, okay. Maybe you go for two. For me, those sliders were just not presentable. They weren't going to elicit a swing. I didn't like going back to the slider for a third consecutive time in the full count. Again, he spits on it, ball in the dirt. Josh Bell walks. And to me, the biggest problem with that is it let him off the hook, but it also, I think, put Helsley in a tough spot with the fastball. Because then when he threw him, they try to go back to it, but it was, I think the timing of the sequence was off. Helsley has been a very feel-based pitcher the last couple of years. I'm not saying that's ideal. You'd like him to have a feel for everything. But if something in an outing kind of goes off kilter, as the catcher, it can be difficult to kind of rein it back in. You have to have a feel for that. And so he throws the slider to Cruz, which is a little bit get me over in nature, but it's a strike. And then we see fastball, little low. If he'd have gotten that call, it would have been a different story, I think, for the Dylan Cruz plate appearance. But it's 1-1. And then again, slider just too far below the zone. It's not presentable to the hitter. And then the fastball in, and then the one that was to the backstop ends up walking Dylan Cruz on that. And it's like, oh boy, now he doesn't even have the fastball. It's like they shook his confidence in the fastball by not going to it in the spot where it's almost as though Helsley was thinking, is he going to call fastball here? Oh, he didn't? Okay, slider. Okay, slider again. Okay, slider for a third time. And then when you go back to the fastball, it's like, well, he didn't have confidence in it before. It's almost kind of like a mind game. I could be reading way too far into it. I just didn't like the sequence to Josh Bell one bit. and I even tweeted it. I just thought, man, he had him dead to rights. And clearly the Cardinals' belief was, and Josh Bell's numbers this season are not good. And that swing against the fastball was not good. And so clearly, I mean, they had the confidence that Josh Bell was all twisted in knots to the point that they could throw a curveball right down Broadway and there was going to be nothing he could do about it because he wasn't going to be thinking curveball. His mind was going to be too much into a pretzel mode to be thinking about curveball, and it was brilliant. But after that, don't let him off the hook. If those sliders are going to be called, I think he's got to put one a little bit closer to the zone and elicit that swing. But by then, he was seeing it well and seeing it in the same location in the dirt every time. And so the guy with the 130 batting average, who does have 5 home runs, so you have to respect that. But I just don't think there's any way Josh Bell was homering off of Ryan Helsley's fastball. But once they kind of lost the confidence in that pitch, that's when you start thinking, oh boy, hold on to your seats. Everybody hold on to their butts because we don't know what's going to happen next. Fortunately, Cardinals got out of it. Helsley got out of it, and he got out of it with a fastball. Throws it right down the middle, but guess what? 101 down the middle is hard to square up. And C.J. Abrams was ready for it. He was looking for it, but couldn't do much with it. Fly ball out to right, and the Cardinals survive and win this game 4-2. Ryan Helsley, I think, is going to be just fine. And I see a lot of people going, oh, they got to trade him now before his value goes down. We've seen this at times the last couple of years. It kind of goes, it ebbs and flows. I think Ryan Helsley is ultimately going to be fine. But this was one where I felt as though it was maybe the sequencing of the pitches that kind of got things off kilter. Because, if I had a fastball that went 101 miles per hour and I threw it by Josh Bell like that, I think you go, man, that's going to be a confidence builder for that pitch. If I'm the catcher, I want to call that pitch right away. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of was he shaking him off? Was Pages calling for all those sliders? What was they got pitch comms, so we don't really know in the way that you could have used to kind of track that. It's not quite as, and I can't claim that I was like locked in on, trying to pitch guess and was he shaking or whatever. I just think it's one of those things where they provided the cooler almost for the fastball that the pitch to Bell I thought would have been one to build confidence in that pitch. And then when they waited too long to go back to it, it's like he lost the feel. Could be amateur sports psychologist. I could have no clue. I could be completely wrong, but that's what it looked like from my couch, which is where I was watching this game, not in Washington, D.C. So we're contextualizing my takes on all this. I just thought it was fascinating because everybody's got something to say about Ryan Helsley because he's obviously a premier player, a marquee player, a guy that is under the microscope because will he be traded? Will he be re-signed? What's the circumstances going to be? He's had this issue with the fastball command and the confidence in the last couple of years. At times, it wanes and then it comes back. And the slider, frankly, is probably his best pitch, which is kind of a strange thing to say about a guy who throws 102. But I think a lot of times that is kind of the way that is viewed. But nevertheless, he found a way to get out of it. And so it's a bottom line league, and you're glad to see the win streak continue. It moves to 7. But yeah, it was dicier than it felt like it had to be. Part of that was, the home run against Palante. Part of it was the 9th inning going the way that it did against Helsley. Part of it was you'd like to see the Cardinals score some more runs. I think you generally feel pretty good about this game today, but there's a lot of innings where the Cardinals just kind of left some meat on the bone. It felt like they kind of went into that cruise control that we talk about sometimes, where I think they almost thought, well, it's the Nationals. They're not very good. We beat them 10-0 yesterday. We got up 4-0 on them. That's all we're going to need. Palante's got us from there. And Palante was great. Had the strikeout stuff. His stuff looked sharp, 7 Ks. But to not be able to tack on was another reason that the Cardinals were in a little bit of a dicey spot in this game. 7 left on base, 3 for 11 with RISP. That's a fine number, but felt like they could have maybe done a little bit more. We'll walk you through the second inning. It's just manufacturing runs. Contreras gets hit by a pitch. Burleson draws a walk. Gorman ends up with a force out at second base. Fielder's choice. Beats it out at first. Pedro Pages with a base hit to drive in a run, and Victor Scott drives one in too. I don't need to see Victor Scott move up in the Cardinals batting order because it seems like he is always Johnny on the spot with these opportunities batting right where he is. And I also like that he's been such a good inning extender that I'd rather have a capable hitter and base runner in Victor Scott batting 9th then like who's the guy you trust the least in the lineup right now? It's probably Gorman or Walker, depending on who's playing. They kind of oscillate. They don't necessarily have the playing time, the opportunity to put both of them in there in the lineup every day, but they seem to be going on in every other some of these times. So if that's who you're feeling least confident in right now, okay. That guy batting ninth, though, just means you're probably not extending the inning to get to Nootbaar and to get to the top of the order, which has been so productive. I don't need the ego boost to like, hey, Victor Scott deserves to be moved up. Well, we're not going to move him up that far because then you'd be dropping Nootbaar, you'd be dropping Donovan, and you just don't need to do that. You're going to keep some semblance of left, right, left. And so I'm not just going to say, well, move Victor up to 7th because he deserves it. No, keep him batting 9th because it makes sense. It's perfect. He's setting the table then for Nootbaar, who doubles to drive in a couple of runs, including Victor Scott. I love Vic batting 9th. I think, and look, Vic had an amazing catch early in this game on a sinking liner in shallow center. Brendan Donovan had a really nice leaping catch deep in left field as well. Took a couple away from Cruz today before Cruz had the home run. I mean, Victor Scott's doing everything you could hope to see him do, and he's batting right where I think he should be. Unless you're going to move him all the way up to leadoff, in which then you're talking about moving guys down that I just don't really think should be moved down at this point. You know, the one guy that we'll see if Mason Wynn is able to maintain the requisite numbers to bat second, but he was 1 for 5 today. I think we'll give that some time, and you like the excitement that he brings as well with some speed element at the top of your lineup. And like with Contreras, if you wanted to move him back to the 2-hole, I'd have no problem with that. If Ivan Herrera you wanted to bat second, I'd have no problem with that. But for now, I think where Scott is, and Pages too, I mean, Pages has continued to be a timely clutch hitter for the Cardinals, racking up RBIs from the bottom of the order. He was 1 for 3 with a walk as well. RBI and a run scored today. He's up to a 674 OPS. Love to see him maybe get to 700 if he could pop a home run to maybe facilitate that. Did not see Herrera in the lineup today. That was not a surprise. Basically, Oliver Marmol, his thought on this, and you can agree or disagree, but what I had read from the reporters was that they didn't want him playing 3 games in a row, Ivan Herrera off the injured list, and there's a righty going on Saturday, lefties going on Sunday, so want to get him in there against the lefty, and so Saturday would be the game that he sits, because otherwise he'd be playing 3 in a row. Even if he's just DHing, we'll see if the Cardinals get him back behind the plate. It is interesting. I will say, I don't know if it 100% passes the sniff test to me. Not that they don't want him to play 3 in a row. I think that's fine. But, the rehab was longer so that he could do more catching and getting back up to speed there. And then if they're just going to DH him when he gets back, I'm not so sure about that. We should probably see him catching on Sunday, but we'll see. That's where it's going to be like this push-pull, and you're not going to be able to maybe hide from it. It's like, all right, is he still the catcher, and that's how you're getting him in the lineup, or is it more about, who cares about the development of that? We just need the bat in there. And heck, Pages is doing so well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They've ridden Pages pretty hard during this stretch, and I don't disagree with it because he's very solid behind the plate. But I'll be curious to see, not only is Herrera going to be in the lineup Sunday, will he be batting or will he be catching? Is it just DHing or is he going to be catching? We'll see. I think as time goes along, it makes more sense to get Herrera behind the plate when you can, but also with what the rotation has been doing, I can understand if I'm Ollie Marmol. I'm not, development is great, but right now we're rolling and we're trying to find a way to catch the Cubs. So can also understand that side of things. Let me know, Cardinals fans, what you think about the entire thing. I don't think that Ivan Herrera is done as a catcher by any means. I think the Cardinals are going to still, this is 2025, this is still that development year for certain guys and certain skill sets. And I think seeing what Herrera can be behind the plate is instructive for the 2026 Cardinals and beyond. So makes sense to continue putting him into those spots. My point is, though, I think you could also bat second in your lineup if at a certain point you're not so sure about Mason Wynn being up there. And, Wynn's done a nice job. The OPS dipping below 750, but he's still doing a nice job. It would just be a very interesting element of your lineup to have Herrera up there, a little more power, I think, than Mason Wynn. And then if it's Wynn Scott or Scott Wynn at the bottom in the 8-9 spots, you really talk about having a lot of speed, on-base potential going from 8-9 to 1, and then Herrera ends up being more of an RBI bopper with Donovan kind of, continuing to grind out at bats behind him. And then you get to Contreras. It could be a very deep lineup for the Cardinals. They just didn't get quite enough done today. That's why this game is a little bit closer, but you're going to win games like that. You're going to have games like that, first of all, and then to be able to win them, I think, is the key. So can feel pretty good about where this rotation's at, and all eyes on Miles Mikolas for Sunday to see if he can keep the trend rolling. But that's my thoughts on Saturday's game. We'll take a quick moment to go down on the farm because there was a pretty nice day to talk about from J.J. Weatherholt. So let's do that next as we go down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? So I think we talked about in the last Down on the Farm that J.J. Weatherholt was a little bit coming back down to earth in terms of his numbers. I think the OPS had gotten down to 750, maybe even a little bit below that. And we were saying, look, going to give him some time at Double-A and he'll be just fine. Well, he went 3 for 5 tonight, had an RBI in that game, raising the OPS back up to 792. So just good to see the 3-hit game for Weatherholt back into the lineup, batting in the 2-hole at shortstop. The Springfield Cardinals did lose that one 6-3 to the Arkansas Travelers. Kind of weird right now from Tekoa Roby, got to be honest with you. Not loving it. Just not loving it. By it, I mean he's not getting very deep into outings, and I'm sure that's intentional by the Cardinals. 65 pitches, 3 innings. It's not that he had just a breezy time, had a couple of runs he gave up, 5 hits, but had 5 strikeouts. They're just being, it seems like kid gloves kind of stuff, which is fine. I know he's had a huge injury history, but it reminds me of Cooper Jerpy, and Cooper Jerpy had the Tommy John eventually anyway. So it's one of those where you're like, I don't know. I'm speaking out of school on this. I know I am because there are things that I'm not covering the Springfield Cardinals day to day, so I have no idea what the game plan is down there. I just keep looking at the box scores going, yeah, not really seeing Roby like imminently able to make that leap. But maybe the Cardinals are kind of starting at a ground floor foundation level with him, saying, look, we're not going to get greedy because we see the stuff. It's tantalizing, but he's also not been able to stay healthy ever since we acquired him. And so let's just build him up slowly here. It's more than fine, but that's just my 2 cents. Like, you want to see, and maybe it's that urge to force it when we know you probably should never force it with pitching, but you want to force it because Jerpy's hurt and Quinn Matthews has been hurt, and you're missing Tink Hence. Maybe that's part of it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that from the Springfield Cardinals. Let's talk Memphis, though, because they had 2 games today for us to get into. We'll start with the one, I don't know which one came first. I'm just reading them in order on the box scores. 8-4 winners for the Redbirds over Charlotte, and Michael McGreevy was very good. 5 innings, 1 run allowed, 9 strikeouts. 1 earned run allowed. He did allow 3 total runs, but only 1 of them was earned. But the 9 strikeouts in 5 innings certainly jumps off the page. Matt Swanson finished up that 7-inning doubleheader. That's still a trend that they are carrying on post-COVID years, basically taking that idea from what MLB did for that 2020 season. But McGreevy looking good. He'll be ready when his name is called again. I am certain of that. The other game for the Redbirds this afternoon or evening, whenever it happened, the Knights beating the Redbirds 3-2 in that one. Kind of a bullpen game. Andre Granillo stands out from that one on the Memphis side. 2 innings, 2 hits allowed, 1 strikeout, no walks, and no runs given up, but not a lot going on offensively for the Redbirds in that game. But that's your update for Down on the Farm, and that's about going to wrap things up here for B-Schaeff Daily tonight. Cardinals have won 7 in a row. We maybe didn't spend enough time talking about it today, but it's just kind of old hat at this point, huh, with the Cardinals and the way they're playing. The Cubs did win a close one over the Mets, I believe. Yeah, they're still playing the Mets 6-5, so the Cardinals did not gain any ground on Chicago there in the Central race, but the Reds, the Brewers, they're all kind of fading into the rear view, right? The Reds are a game and a half behind the Cardinals. The Brewers, 2 back of St. Louis, and the Pirates way distant there in the background. Cardinals still getting it done, 7 in a row. We'll see if they can make it 8. I believe the Cardinals have won, 9 of their last 11 as well. The main thing is the 7 straight. For those wondering, it doesn't quite get the Cardinals into a playoff position just yet. I know we're so far away from that mattering. But the NL West, if you haven't looked at those standings recently, is just kind of ridiculous. The Dodgers aren't even in first place as I record this. 26-14 is their record. The Padres are up on them by percentage points. The Giants and Diamondbacks are also above 500. Giants have a 600 winning percentage. The D-backs are tied with the Cardinals, and the Rockies are literally going to be worse than the White Sox last year. They are horrible. I mean, they are pathetically bad. But the Phillies are also 23-16 with a 590 winning percentage. So the Phillies Giants and Dodgers would be the wild card teams as of now, with the Cardinals and D-backs sitting at 21-19. So nobody cares about that, but just in case, anybody wanted to say, hey, are they in a playoff position? The answer would be no, but maybe soon. It's certainly possible if they can continue the way that they've been playing. It's going to be tough. They're going to need to score on Mackenzie Gore, I think, on Sunday because, Miles Mikolas, I don't know if he's going 7 innings shutty or 7 1/3 2. We'll see. He's been a lot better recently. If he just can give them a chance to win, Cardinals probably should make Mackenzie Gore throw some pitches. He's a guy that'll strike you out, but he'll also walk you if you let him. 4 walks that he allowed in his last start. So that would be the way that I think the Cardinals could win on Sunday. I predicted the sweep coming into the weekend. They have every opportunity now to do it. Trying to get to that bullpen sooner than later, I think, would be to the benefit. Trevor Williams kind of let him off the hook today, or the Cardinals let him off the hook, rather, by him getting through 6, and it limited the exposure the Cardinals had to the bullpen in this one. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll talk to you after the Cardinals wrap up their series with the Nationals on Sunday. Appreciate you guys for always listening and always supporting the podcast. We'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.